I'll just hear. All right. So welcome and thank you for coming tonight. I really appreciate you giving us a little bit of your time now. Oh, Maya's here. And I also appreciate you giving us your time in the future to help us select the next cohort of students. I don't know if Wesley sent you an email real recently, but today we found out that we have the biggest applicant pool we've ever had. So interest in icons continues to grow. And the good problem that we have in front of us is that we likely have a large applicant pool with a lot of really qualified people in it, and we want to make sure that we give every deserving student the best chance that they have to participate in icons, and that we assemble a cohort that's going to gel and work together and succeed and all that. And I don't want to speak at you. This is an icons thing, and so I immediately want to ask you a question of, since we're looking for a cohort that's going to succeed, what does it mean to succeed? So I simply open the floor. From your point of view, what does it mean to excel or even succeed in icons? What does that mean to you?
I don't mind going first. If we're looking at it purely from the student's perspective and not from icons' perspective, I would say it's mostly about like just getting any kind of personal development or experience from it. And I know that that's like kind of vague, but like that's kind of the point. Like it can be different for everybody. Like whether it's somebody who just wants to get to a certain point to gain access to the career they want, or someone who just has a goal of, I want to be a better scientific writer. Like whatever somebody wants to get out of icons, I guess would be the most like successful thing that they could do.
The first thing you did was you said you pushed back on the idea of there being one criteria for success, that it can be divergent and that it can look different for different people. Cool. What else might we think of as evidence of success or things that happen for students who succeed?
Here I can go. I'm thinking in a systemic thinking process on where icons is able to connect everything, whether it is on the different aspects and approaches on a problem, or for the student's perspective of all that they learned over time. It's starting to come together in their application on how they solve a problem in their icons class.
Okay. Keep coming. Let's just try and sort of define the scope of what this might mean to each of us individually so that we can share an understanding when we go into these interviews.
I can go. I think people are willing to be collaborative to very wide sets of expertises. As a biology major, I think the most I got out of icons was when I got to work with chemistry majors and physics majors. So that's something I would look for with applicants, is people excited to do that as well.
Okay, so somebody who's open, at least open to collaboration. Yeah, I think that you pointed to something important there. You can't expect people to have already succeeded in that, because that's what we're here for. But if they're open to it, then they stand a good chance of benefiting from that environment.
I can go. I feel like there's some bare minimums too, like if you're talking to someone who you're interviewing, you want them to be like relatively personable.
Okay.
Obviously, you don't want to be working with someone, kind of goes to collaboration. You don't want to be working with someone that is super stuck up or thinks they're the best person in the world or thinks they can't learn anything from anyone else. So you want like some kind of basic kind of friendliness that kind of has the genuine motivation to learn.
Do you think that arrogance is a contraindicator of success?
I don't think so.
Okay.
But I can see how an icon setting it could be a bad thing, considering it's more team-based. But like an inventor type thing where you're by yourself, I could see like arrogance could be a nice thing.
Paraphrasing, you're welcome to tell me I'm wrong.
Yeah. No, I see the benefits of it too.
Okay. What else to each of you did success mean? When you finished and you know, like graduated from UMass and from Icons and you look back on that and was like, yeah, got it. What were you proud of? What were the things that you look back on as and you consider them, this is what I got out of it. This is why I did it. This is what success means.
I think for me personally, the leadership aspect was really important. Obviously, my job in the Army, I have to lead a lot of people, but I lead a lot of very intelligent people that have degrees, most of them master's degrees. So being able to try that out in Icons originally, be able to say like, hey, all these people are really smart. How do we do that talent management? And how do we actually make sure that we're answering the problem at hand and all working together on it and utilizing people's talents properly is a really hard leadership task. It's something that Icons was able to give me a lot of ideas on how to do that. And honestly, I use it every day at work. So that was something that I used all the time and still continue to use in Icons and now.
Yeah, so leadership, but leadership specifically tied to understanding and being able to use a division of expertise. So it's a particular approach to collaboration that isn't just like everybody grab a shovel and get to work. It's more complex than that. Yeah.
I think for me, it was about comfort with discomfort and being able to be faced with a problem where there are no real answers, and whether that's coming from the instructors or the team members, and then being able to kind of go from there. And so the success to me looked like being able to face those kind of scenarios in the future and know that that is part of what being a scientist or being any number of professionals at the head of the field means.
Risk tolerance, was that in there, Eric?
I think it's risk tolerance, but it's comfort with risk. I think is like, it's not just about tolerance, but it's about understanding the value in risk rather than just like having an armor to it.
Fair enough.
I think these are all like really solid points, and they all contribute to the same thing for me, where I think Lucas started making this point where it's like you come here and you're willing to participate in an environment where you can learn certain lessons. I think for me specifically, the best thing was that I had several like of those aha moments about different ideas in general, whether it was leadership or science, like a specific technical lesson that I learned, or like I gained a more general skill. I think on one hand, it's like I saw personal success in being able to come away with some really meaningful knowledge. And then I think the other arm of it was, like you asked about, is arrogance a contraindication? I think maybe to the second arm of what I'm trying to say, which is that you might find success, but you should also participate in the culture that lets other people find similar lessons as you did. So it's like part of the success that I had in Icons was like taking lessons away from myself. And then the other half was being able to work in an environment that made it easy for the people around me to learn the same things that I did. So we all kind of came away with some really meaningful knowledge in the end.
Yeah. So leaving some air in the room for everybody to contribute, but also recognizing and valuing that their success doesn't diminish your own. Is that what I'm hearing you say, Michael?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think for me, I found success in having a community of other students that were, going through a lot of the same experiences that I was in terms of classes and like finding a thesis advisor and writing a thesis. So having that like group of people to talk to about the good times and the bad times, that was, I think, successful for me, I guess.
Other thoughts before we look at that question from the other side? So the other side of it, from my point of view, is that those are the, that side was, what did you experience and what did you value? And what were the things that you took away from being a member of the icons community? If you think about it as a sort of a proficiency map, we're looking for students who have not yet succeeded, and we're trying to figure out whether they will or whether they will benefit, whether they're going to get something valuable from the experience, and whether or not they're likely to feel comfortable, like Kevin, you were just saying, like find a home in that community and experience that in a way that you did and that you valued, being part of a cohort and part of a community that had a shared sense of mission or a shared sense of purpose. So thinking back to like when you were applying to the program, you probably didn't know what you were getting into, and that's okay. That's nobody does. But what were the things that maybe you brought to the table that you didn't have to develop in icons, but that were part of who you were when you were going through the application process that prepared you to succeed? Can I ask that question, Will?
Yeah, I think for me, what I brought was just a sense of knowing that I, was an engineering major, but I knew that I wanted to do something beyond that or something more. And, think about social issues within and beyond my major. So that I think is what or what like drew me to icons. I'm hoping that other students also like have that motivation to join icons.
So you're actually extending that a little bit further. So one thing that you would look for when you're speaking with a potential applicant is possibly a desire to work outside of their major. And however that comes across or however that's expressed, that might be one of the things that you think of as, yeah, that's good. You'll get an opportunity to do that. Icons will feel fulfilling to you. Take as long as you want with this, because this is really the nuts and bolts of like doing an interview, is identifying success indicators and possibly red flags, things that might indicate that someone's not a good fit.
I was definitely excited. I think that was like my number one thing. I think honestly, when I was applying, I didn't even have a completely concrete understanding about what icons was about, looking at hindsight. But I think I was like so excited about joining a community, even if I was wrong about what I thought was exactly the point or what was going on. I was really interested. Like I was genuinely excited to be there. And I think that because of that, even when certain classes or certain steps throughout the icons curriculum turned out not to be exactly what I thought they were, I was like ready to adapt and totally jump into it and still have a good time and get something out of it. And I think that's pretty important. I think that really helped me a lot.
Great, cool.
I had a quick question. Are we getting anything from the interviewees, like a resume or application cover letter or anything like that?
We have not in the past, and that's been a design decision. And in fact, the preamble to the first interview question, after we finish this discussion, we'll look at the interview questions. The preamble to the first one begins with, I want you to know that I've not read your application because I want to hear from you from a different point of view. Somebody else is reading the written applications. I want to speak to you one-on-one about why you're here. If you think that it would be valuable to have a resume or a cover letter or something, I'm open to changing the interview process. Nothing is written in stone, but in the past, that's what we've done. And that's why.
Personally, I found that was a good idea because it didn't allow me to create any predetermined either biases for or against based on their background or like based on the experience that they already had. And it allowed the interviewee to pick essentially based on the questions, what things from their resume they felt were best to tell me. And I found that very telling, in the sense that having done it last year, there's some applicants who made it seem like they had already saved the world. And then there's other applicants that were like, well, like I did this in high school, but it was actually really cool. And they had done a lot, but they were very, very humble about it. So I think allowing the interviewee to kind of pick their own story in that sense allows them greater flexibility in order to impress upon us as the interviewer what is best, or what they want to tell us.
There's something else that happens when you ask somebody to essentially curate their own story in that way, is they're also communicating to you without directly saying it, the things that they think are most important. So they're communicating something about their value systems by the stories that they choose to tell about themselves. And so if you're an attentive listener and you're paying attention to that kind of stuff, you can actually learn something other than what you're directly asking them about through their decisions about what they choose to talk about. So let me bring it back to the question of like, put yourself back in that sense of, were you prepared to be a member of the icons community? What was it that made you a good fit? What were the characteristics, personality, attributes, ambition, interests, whatever it is? All of that stuff is one big sort of mishmash of who somebody is.
I feel like, also going outside of the academic area, like if someone has a lot of hobbies, that can be telling that they're trying new things.
Okay.
So like things surrounding, or aspects that are surrounding trying new things, like maybe they volunteer, maybe they have a bunch of really diverse hobbies that you don't really hear about, extracurriculars, stuff like that. But more really just to show that they're willing to go outside their comfort zone to actually learn something new that they wouldn't really have exposure to before that.
Cool. What else?
I wouldn't say that I was ready for icons, but one of the things that really piqued my interest when going through the application process was on that student-driven collaboration, because didn't really experience the experience like, group works and whatnot, but not in the sciences. And where that could be then for a person, as you were mentioning before, on the items that they open up first, the stories that they tell. Maybe like, a story on how they collaborated with a group, whether academic or outside, could be one good telling way.
Cool. What else? Sean, Maya, Kiki?
I don't know. I think like personally, it's still an open question as to whether I'm like successful or whatever. So it's sort of like a difficult thing for me to engage with. But I definitely think that among my peers, the ones I liked working with most were the ones that were like open to doing new things, sure, but also open to like meeting new people, doing things a different way that someone else had suggested, and being able to follow someone that wanted to be a leader, that openness to personal collaboration as well as professional.
Yeah.
I think for me, this isn't an exclusive criteria, but when I started Icons, I had absolutely no idea what I wanted to go into or research. And especially freshman year and sophomore year, when Icons is like wearing many hats and doing many different kinds of projects, it was very useful for me personally to try many different kinds of like biology, like environmental versus molecular. And I think that set me up for success, is being able to try all those things and then kind of pick what I'm interested in. And I think an applicant who has tunnel vision about what they like need to go into, I might steer away from, versus someone who's open to many things.
Lily, something that you just said there, Was it one of your goals when you came to the program to figure out what you wanted to do? Was it
That
your
was one. I mean, it wasn't the only one, but that was definitely a goal of
on
mine.
the
Yeah.
list? You wanted to try a bunch of things and figure out what it was that you really wanted to do. So you came in specifically with, with an objective. I'm going to use this as a platform through which I will, find out some things about myself.
Yeah, that was definitely an objective of mine. Yeah.
That's cool. I like that. I'm not trying to converge onto one set. Somebody just said, this is not exclusive. None of these are exclusive. In fact, some of them may even be, not even complementary, but they're all possible indicators of sort of a propensity to succeed. I don't even know the right words for this, but somebody who's likely going to be a good fit for icons, somebody who's got one or more of these characteristics. And so, are there things that we've missed before we look at the application? I've heard a lot about sort of being open to new things, being open to collaboration, having some personal goals, having something that you actually are stepping into icons looking to get, and a few other things like the complement between like confidence and also humility. So that combination of attributes, things along those lines. Is there anything that we've missed in there? Take a couple of minutes and think, like what else might we look for, or might we be wary of in an individual? Wary is too strong, but I think you know what I mean.
I think it's easy sometimes to get wooed by the students that have had past experience just because they're able to talk about really interesting things and synthesize that information into the things that they got out of it. And that's incredible. And I think those students are often very good for icons. But I think the way I've typically looked at applications is going in looking for the excitement and the openness piece, because that comes without differences in opportunity. That's something very intrinsic and not based on your background. So I think encouraging people to kind of keep that in mind throughout. That's something that I always like have to check for myself, being like, okay, the student has a really incredible resume, but I'm not going to put that as higher against a student that doesn't have that resume, but has the same excitement and drive and ambition.
I think you touched on an interesting point there, because, the fact that somebody has a really smoking resume may be an indicator of privilege rather than an indicator of good fit. And is that what the direction you were taking that, Kiki?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's just a super important access to keep in mind, and definitely something that I have to consciously remind myself of when I'm looking for.
Good. It's actually a really good thing to keep in mind, because we're looking for people who will benefit from being in icons, and that doesn't necessarily not align, but it doesn't correlate with prior opportunities.
Justin, can you pull out a little bit how you're thinking about that with looking for people who benefit from the program versus who benefit the program? Because I feel like we've been mostly talking about the latter.
Who will benefit the program or benefit from the program?
Right, that's what I'm trying to parse out.
Yeah.
Because you were saying we're looking for people who would benefit from the program, and I completely agree. But I think my brain has been going to, and I think I've heard mostly responses around who can like provide things to a program or to a cohort.
So the things that we've been talking about have been people who are likely to feel comfortable in the learning environment. If I was to aggregate all of the things that we've been talking about, it's all about sort of comfort in this atypical learning environment that's cohort based, where we lean on you to not only identify the solutions, but identify the problems that we're going to start with, and to articulate not just what we're going to do, but why that's important and who it's going to affect and what the economic repercussions are going to be. So that's, and work in multidisciplinary teams on unsolved problems. All of these things, all the verbiage that we use to describe icons distinguishes it from Chem 121, right? And so everything that we've been talking about has described someone in some way who is likely to feel comfortable in that atypical environment. What is the type of person who is likely to also take something from that environment and grow in ways that are meaningful and productive? And, when we're thinking about the mission of inspiring a diverse generation of leaders in science and technology, like, who's going to move into that role? Who are the people we should be offering these opportunities to?
Yeah, I think it's obviously very, very difficult to know. And I think for applicants, there's probably no really bad choices in terms of who you offer things to. That being said, I think your emphasis on comfort learning in this environment, I think, is really important, because I don't think a student can go through 4 years of icons and continually be uncomfortable and unequipped to deal with these kind of classes. But I think a level of discomfort going in is probably almost inevitable and important, because I don't think anyone knows what they're doing getting into icons. And if they do, it's because they have known someone who can tell them the exact details of what the program is.
Yeah, I think like last year and this year were the first times we're actually having younger siblings apply to the program and show up, which is kind of cool. I mean, it's a mature enough program that we're starting to see not multi-generational, but multi-family kinds of things. So what you just said, Eric, first of all, you asked me what's my thinking on it. My thinking is not what matters. Your thinking is what matters, because you know better than I do what it takes to succeed and what being in icons actually feels like. So I trust your expertise and your point of view. That's why I'm asking you these questions. But then you actually turned it around and said, one of the things that helps somebody benefit from the program is actually being comfortable in that environment. Because if you're comfortable in that environment, you're likely to have, to stick with it when it gets hard. You're likely to put in the effort that leads to the benefits and that sort of thing. So I don't know if that's what you meant to do with that, but that was a little bit of what I heard. Am I right in that, or am I off base?
I think you're correct, but I think what I meant is that I think I know from doing this last year, like, there were definitely people who were very unsure about what the program was and maybe even had misconceptions about what it was. And I still saw them as valuable applicants, because I saw what other people have already said, like that inherent sense of drive, the interest in growth. What Lily said, like an actual interest in figuring out what they want to do. And so I think initial levels of discomfort or unsureness are not disqualifiers. Not that anyone said that, but I think that that's something I am thinking about as I'm interviewing people and assessing them.
Great. Excellent. Thank you for throwing that on the table. Response, other thoughts along those lines? Without forcing us into any kind of rubric or structure like that, how comfortable do you feel with the sense that we share an idea about what we would be looking for in an applicant? What would you be looking for? What are the sorts of things you would want to see or want to hear or be open to hearing when you're speaking with an applicant? Just like in a scale of yep to no, like where are you at with your sense that we are on the same page?
Can I ask a question before I answer that?
Yeah, of course.
So I'm assuming there's going to be some kind of like check-in with either you or Wesley or whoever after we've done all the interviews to like go over the people we've talked to. What are those going to look like? Like, are we going to be like, I heard this in the interview, you saw this on their application, combine that, or?
Can I just toss that back to somebody who did this last year, and you can explain how you submitted feedback on each of the interviews?
Yeah, I'd be happy.
Thank you.
There was actually no like back and forth after this. I think last year I basically got my list of candidates and I interviewed them on my time, and then I just submitted like a standardized feedback form for each one. It was like a few simple questions. There was I forget exactly what it was asking, but I think I ranked like some questions like a 1 to 10, and then I gave a little bit of like personalized feedback. I just wrote in what I thought or something similar. And then I just submitted that to the program. I personally didn't hear back afterwards, which maybe was a good thing. I was like, I hope I didn't do anything wrong.
No, you didn't do anything wrong. Well, we don't like,
Yeah.
we would certainly never release back to you, yeah, the people you interviewed got in or anything like that. That's privileged information. You don't get to find that out. But what we do with the information you provide, I think it's a Google form. And for after every interview, you like, we do it scaffolded. Couple of like numeric score things to get you thinking sort of on a scale, and then open response. What did you hear? What were the things that you took away from this? What are the things you want the admissions committee to consider when they're looking at these applicants? The admissions committee is going to take their responses to the written application, those comments from the interviews, and put all that together to actually make a very coarse-grained recommendation to Scott. And that will look like, here is a set of people who definitely should admit, clear, good fit, solid, bring them in. And then another bin, call it another grouping of students who are likely a good fit, people who will probably benefit from being in the program, probably be happy in there. And then a bin of like, these are people who don't evidence a good preparation or a good fit for icons. Either they want something that icons doesn't provide, or they're looking for something that is going to be very different from the experience they're likely to have, or something along those lines. And then so we admit all these people, and then Scott and Wesley kind of work through the rest of this to make sure that we have a diverse enough cohort, that we have enough disciplinary diversity, we have different representation from different points of view and groups and everything, to make sure that the cohort has the diversity it needs to succeed. Does that help, Lucas? So
yes, thank you.
I'm sorry you didn't get anything back. You should get a thank you when you're done. At the very least, and a notice that yes, you are in fact complete, and we received all your feedback, and I'll make sure Wesley sends those out this year. So shall we look at the script? It's actually here if you want to look at it yourself. And in fact, I made it editable for the very good reason that I want you to edit it. Did that show up for you? So you can either look at that on your screen or you can look at it on my screen. And the way that we structured this, oh good, you guys dropped in, perfect, is that there's essentially 4 questions with some wrappers around them. And the first question is, tell me about something you wrote in your application that you want me to hear before we move to my questions. And so I don't remember who said it, but asking the applicant to curate their application and pull out the one thing that they really want you to know is we found to be a useful question. Describe a time when you were super motivated to work on a project, or the prospective version, as Kiki pointed out, if you didn't have an opportunity to work on a project that wasn't graded, what kinds of projects outside of school would you be motivated to work on? So that's the more equitable way of posing that question. And somebody could answer it from the point of view of, this is a thing I did, I was motivated on, or this is a thing I could envision I would be motivated on. But you choose, use your judgment as how you would pose these things. Tell me about an experience we had to share responsibility on an important project, approaching the collaboration ungradedness shared responsibility kinds of aspects of being in icons. What do you see as the pros and cons of that fact that icons is a multi-year program? This is something that we added after the first, I think year that we did this, because some students don't recognize that they're stepping into something that isn't just one course, that is actually something that continues on. And so thinking about that a little bit ahead of time, I mean, it has pros and cons, and just knowing that somebody's aware of that. And then, of course, what else do you want to know? Because you're a resource to them as well. So first question about this is, to what extent would someone's responses to these questions be useful to you, and the follow-up that you might ask, be useful to you in figuring out whether someone is likely a good fit or likely not a good fit for icons?
I had pretty good luck last year with most of the questions. I feel like I got good answers that helped me judge people for everything except for 3. I had a lot of trouble with question 3. I don't know if that was because of the way I was asking it, or if it's just like a complicated question to ask over the phone. But I felt like more often than not, when I asked that question, everyone was more confused than like thinking about how to answer that in a meaningful way.
If I may hop on that, what I found was the easiest for that question, because I also got a lot of confusion, was flipping it, so that instead of saying like, hey, here's something that you have done, what is something that you would do? Like, let's say if this was actually a case study or something like that in icons, how would you organize your team? And then I try to like narrow it down for them in the sense of like, for example, if you were given an engineering major and a biology major and you were a math major, how would you go about doing it? So like, just to, not saying like they had to like take that specific scenario, but trying to throw out something to help get them started, because it is a bit of a loaded question.
So it sounds like you leaned on the prospective option for this, the scenario one. Here's the thing: if you were on a team with these 2 or 3 other people with different expertise, what would you do? How would you organize yourselves? How would you divide the effort or labor? So that's more of an envisioning yourself kind of question.
Yeah, that's what I focused on personally.
Yeah, I think I did something very similar. It's just most of the responses I got, like if I said, here's a problem and you're working with a math major and a biology major, the responses would basically be, well, the math major would do the math and the biology major would do the biology. And I was like, okay, well, that didn't really.
Well, could you be more shallow?
Yeah, on these, I know this isn't exactly an answer to the question that you asked, Justin, but because we're talking about this question 3, and I did this last year, I think I focused more on the less prospective question. I got decent answers. I have to admit, I don't think these questions, like the prospective and whatever the opposite of the prospective is, are that interchangeable. I think these are, I think there's a lot of good reasons that the prospective question is very hard to answer, because it supposes a student is familiar with icons, or at least it forces them to be in the icons mindset, which I think is really valuable, but I don't think it's a substitute for tell me about a time you shared responsibility. I think they take a lot, one takes a very different kind of thinking than the other.
I completely agree. So under what circumstances might you use one form or the other?
I frequently started with like the reflective option. I think with 3, I really tried to focus on being like, tell me about something that is a shared responsibility that is or isn't in school. So that was kind of the way that I tried to flip it, in a way that people who haven't had privilege in terms of like interdisciplinary experiences and whatever were able to answer that question. And then if I kind of got a stumped face anyway, no matter like they just could not think of something, then I'd kind of be like, okay, here's like an example that's something you could do. Like if you can't think of something, here, let me give you a prompt. But unless I really got like a stumped face and being like, can you think of something? I really tried to go like think creatively about how you'll answer this. And I'm looking for anything. It does not have to be academic, but think back to something. That was kind of how I approached it.
So you use the second form, in the angle brackets as a fallback. That if somebody didn't have an experience to draw on and describing what they have already done or have already experienced, that asking them to be creative in imagining themselves in a situation was a way to talk about the same things and allowed somebody the space to, I can't think of anything. Well, let me offer you some constraints on your creativity and maybe that will help you. So since we're focusing on this one, how might we change this? Well, one thing that we should change is that this is last year's problem. Puerto Rico's experiencing widespread power outages due to complex failures of the utility system. So this would need to get changed for this year to be something else. Whoops, hey.
I will say it doesn't need to change.
Yeah, it's still
That's
relevant.
true.
I guess it is
It's
still
really
relevant.
right now, actually.
Well, this
Um,
link may
Yeah,
be outdated.
yeah, that's true.
I mean, that's
I think
over 2020.
I don't know if they're. I think maybe the question can change slightly, but I just see them as separate questions that might be both valuable to ask. I just don't see them as two options for question 3.
You would break this into 2.
Yeah, I would.
I was gonna say, even if you like just read the questions a little more carefully, like one asks about sharing responsibility and the other one asks about collaboration. Like, I mean, I guess those are kind of the same thing, but like one of them seems like more organizational and one seems more like just getting along with others and like figuring out who's best at doing what. I don't know exactly how to say what I'm trying to say, but they're kind of vastly different in that way.
Yeah, I want to add on to that because if you have a real life experience where you're trying to divvy up the work with other majors or people with different experiences, you might not always get what you want. Whereas with the perspective option, you can choose exactly what you want to do and what the other majors are going to do. So it doesn't really have that teamwork aspect or interpersonal skill aspect where you have to maybe not get the work that you might not get the work that you want the most when you're working on it.
I'm happy to, this is your script. We just want to come out of this with a script that you feel comfortable starting from and adapting from and doing your interviews. We all need to be in the same ballpark, but we don't need to read the same questions. I don't know if any of you have done interviews for like job positions, but one of the typical requirements, at least at UMass, is that every person on the recruiting committee or whatever, selection committee, has a subset of the interview questions, and you have to read them word for word the same to each applicant that you're interviewing. We're not constrained by that. We should, there's a reason why they ask you to do that. And I think all of us understand where that reasoning comes from, but we're not so rigidly constrained. And if your personality comes out through this, that's okay. All right, so one significant change we made was to break 3 into actually 2 questions that may back to back on each other, but still ask about different aspects of working together. One is, how did you feel about sharing responsibility for a project? And the other is, how might interdisciplinarity actually play a role or be an advantage in solving a problem or working together? So not just effective, but interdisciplinary. I would shy away from using words like interdisciplinary in an interview like this, personally. But you'll have better ways of saying that than I would.
I wonder if it would be valuable for after question 3, depending on what they say, to ask if they could do anything differently to improve how they collaborated. What would they do? I'd be curious what you guys also think of that.
Yeah, I get what you're saying because that's, going back onto reflection and how in the program, every time we went through a project, we always went to a reflection step, both personally for ourselves and then for, the whole project.
So did I add something there that works for you? As
Yeah.
a suggested potential follow-up question?
Yeah, I like that.
Oh,
I
thank
think
you.
related to that, if we wanted to turn it into another question and also at the same time give more context about the program itself
Mhm.
through the question by saying like, oh, one of our, values is reflecting on your experience, trying to, yourself, how you, and also that could be a good way to kind of indicate like what we're hoping to get out of students as well.
So I changed that around to in icons, we frequently reflect on experiences and identify opportunities for growth. What might you do differently next time based on that experience you just described? So it contextualizes the follow-up question. Excellent. Along those same lines, are there any other potential follow-up questions that you would add to, let's say, question 1? If we all go back and look at that one.
I really like one. I think it's one of my favorite questions. I think it's a time that I don't speak very much. I'm just like, hey, this is me. Tell me something, and then I just kind of shut up. And I think that's the beauty of one. So I would keep it as it is.
So maybe note, like de-emphasize follow-up questions and just give them space.
Yeah, so like after the underlined part of the why is that important to you and how does it align?
Yep.
Yeah, like that could be after the space, maybe when it's like, oh, if it lingers on for a bit, that could be the ending of question 1. Like,
And you may not need follow-up questions. They may address it completely in their response.
Mhm.
So follow-up questions are intended for you to elicit further information from the applicant. If they haven't given you what you need to hear. Or if you think that something has been missing or only superficially addressed, giving them an opportunity to better articulate their thinking is that's what they're there for. Other thoughts on question 1? This link is going to remain live. You can continue to add, make suggestions, edits, or whatever to this. And this can be the actual shared document from which you do your interviews. That's also totally fine. I'm sure that Wesley will distribute, a set of prompts based on this that you can further work on, but this is like the working version of it. How about question 2? This is about the learning environment. Stuff's not graded. You're not getting like numeric score feedback on your work. How do you stay motivated in that space?
Yeah, I like this question. I actually really like the part where it goes back to first person and says, as an interviewer, that we found we needed to like adjust our priors on like what it would take to be motivated and feel successful. That's something like I would feel like I couldn't necessarily add in because I want to be standardized and be fair to everyone. But the fact that it's in there like feels true to me at least. So it's something I think is nice. And is good for students to hear. Yeah.
I like that you brought authenticity in there. If something in here does not resonate with you and you would feel inauthentic saying it, don't say it. Other thoughts on this or edits that you would consider making to either learn more appropriate things about the applicant or make it resonate better with your experiences?
I would like to just pose something. I'm not saying that I think or know that this will be good or bad. I'm just kind of curious what people's thoughts on it would be. Possibly expanding the question from just in terms of like a project that someone worked on to like a goal that someone tried to achieve. Like, I can imagine that that might be valuable as a question to ask, but then like if you stretch it out to like, okay, what was the thing that you really strived to accomplish that wasn't necessarily a project, like maybe you were just trying to, I don't know, run a mile in under 6 minutes, like that would show that you're motivated but not necessarily in a sense that would be, I don't know. I guess I'm just kind of asking, like, does anyone think that that would be valuable? I feel like it could be, but might not be. I don't know.
I like that a lot. I think too is where I struggled the most to kind of come at it from a perspective of like a student that maybe didn't necessarily like have the free time to go above and beyond on something, or like trying to come at this from a privileged blind place, or like something that kind of honors people's different experiences. So I think towards the goal is definitely nice. And I think I also tend to spin this a little bit towards like still schoolwork. Like even if you like, I feel like there are usually some sort of experiences that universally that you have in school is something, I don't know. I'm not sure what I'm trying to say here. Basically, this is the question I struggle with the most. And I think kind of expanding it to be like also a goal is a good idea.
So to work on a project, I'll just put in a slash. Is that going to make sense to everybody? Work on a project. I heard toward a goal. Is there perhaps a third way of putting this that would complement those two? Is that wasn't graded, is that important in this?
I think that's just kind of a shorthand way of saying that you got some kind of abstract reward from the thing. Like you didn't, like it's just like you didn't get a letter on a report card at the end of the day, which is like what most students are used to at this point as the thing that drives them. But like,
Let's sort of presume that grades are the motivating factor for many people,
yeah,
doesn't it? And that might be a little pejorative.
it could be rephrased to just, yeah, like to some kind of like external abstract reward besides a grade, like self-satisfaction or, just being proud of yourself. I don't know, something along those lines.
Yeah. I don't want, the one thing that
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think it's a good idea to add a lot of circumlocutions to these things. So if there's a succinct way of saying that.
I personally am going to defend the not graded piece. I agree that it does make an assumption about grades being an intrinsic motivator, but because we're describing a class, I think that is built into it. And so I think that's the distinction we're trying to make, is that this course does not have clear grading or as straightforward grading as students might expect. And so that's what we're trying to elicit, is those other motivators, which could be other more tangible motivators besides grades. But I hear the issue with the grading language, but I think it makes sense because we're trying to gauge their motivation in a 4 years of a college course, where usually grades, especially for a lot of the students who are going to be applying to icons, are such driving motivators.
Do you all know the difference between intrinsic and extrinsic motivating factors? There's a whole learning theory around this. And icons does lean very heavily on intrinsic motivation. So Eric, you're spot on even using that language there. So I'm hearing that this is getting towards something meaningful, that making it specific that wasn't graded is a worthwhile distinction to make, because it articulates this is in form of extrinsic motivation. Can you speak about your intrinsic motivation instead?
That's where I'm coming from, but I don't want to speak for everyone here because I think
I'm
very reasonable.
I'm accepting all suggestions. I feel like we already spent a bunch of time on question 3 and 3.5. Do we feel like we're good on that for now? How about the multi-year question?
Can I ask a quick question on 3.5, Justin?
Oh, yeah.
Sorry. If I remember correctly, do we get their like major? I know we don't get application materials, but because we have to make up like who they be working with and like adding other disciplines in there, do we get, or should we ask that as part of the question, or do we get that ahead of time?
If you don't get it ahead of time, I think that's perfectly reasonable to ask them. That might come out in the first question. Tell me a little bit about yourself in a sense. That might show up in there, but if you don't know it by now, feel free to ask. I think, do any of you remember from last year, like the list that you get from Wesley has like name, contact information, I think it has major in there.
I think so too.
Year.
I think
and
it's
college
year
semester.
two. I think it's freshman or sophomore too.
Yeah, it has whether they're a first or second year student. Yeah. So you get some of that really basic information. Okay. Pros and cons of multi-year program.
I was definitely curious to hear from the people who've already done this, like if they learned anything interesting about the applicants from this question, or if this was just a convenient way to bring up, hey, icons is 4 years, not 1.
Just FYI.
Yeah.
Comments, feedback?
I think this kind of plays into there's an application question about like how does icons fit into your like 5 to 10 year plan or something, like more eloquent than that, but about that. I think this gets at that question, and since we haven't read that, I think it's a nice kind of way to get at that a little bit and just see that they've thought about it. It can change, but just see that they've kind of thinking in that direction.
Suggestions on how we might refocus on what we actually hope to learn through this? I'm also cognizant of the time, and I know that it's 9 o'clock, so I'd like to wrap up shortly out of respect for your time.
Yeah, I think I had some good responses from this, and I definitely had people struggling a little bit with the cons, but some identified them, and they definitely aligned with some of the challenges I saw both for myself and for peers through going through the program. I think maybe pulling out a little bit about the cohort aspect of this might be valuable, because some people identify that like, oh, I'm going to be with the same people all 4 years, so that's a plus and minus, but other people, I don't know if they fully got that. So I know, yeah, I see that as the follow-up, but maybe something about having continuity with the people that you're learning with might be valuable.
So how is something about how is continuity important? And question 5 is, I'm pretty sure we don't need to change that. It's simply an open-ended, it's the way that most interviews end. What do you want to know? So it returns the initiative to them. Also, again, the way that somebody answers it could be as interesting as what they say. So if they're like, no, I'm good. Oh, are you though? Because there's probably a lot you don't know. And so hoping to actually get some good thoughts from somebody that they know that they don't know, and that's fine.
Justin, given that people are coming, as interviewers are coming from different cohorts of the program, are there any like recent developments about how icons is structured that we should know, so that we're not giving them incorrect information about based on
Great
like
question.
how we go through stuff?
One, probably the only like meaningful difference for folks that graduated a few years ago is that we now invite and welcome business students to the program, so that there's a possibility to work. So it's, you know, focusing on the possibility of innovation being entrepreneurial as well. So allowing for that possibility. We've had like 2, 3, 4 sort of business students per year in the program for the last couple of years. And they participate on teams. They will understand that they're in a science program and that they're going to have to act as a member of a team doing science and engineering, doing STEM work, but that they are bringing a point of view or an expertise of like finance or management or something along those lines to the way that that team operates. So you may wind up interviewing somebody who is an applicant from Eisenberg. So that's one possibility. And I think that's probably the biggest change. Again, I said I want to respect your time. I've already run over a little bit, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Thank you for. Does everybody still have that link saved somewhere? So if there are further things you think of, I'm sure there's a way to do track changes in this. I'm sure there's a way for you to leave comments or whatever. Feel free to just add your thoughts to this document, critique, suggest, whatever, and whatever consensus version there is that we have, whatever this converges on, will be the script that we'll distribute. And then of course you make it yours. So based on your personality, your priorities, your experiences, the way that you speak, you make it yours. Thank you very much for taking an hour tonight to go through this, improve it, make it more useful, make it more direct, make it more applicable to understanding our applicant pool. And I look forward to hearing what kind of feedback you have about our applicants this year. I really look forward to that. It's going to be a fun process. So I appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time. Is there anything anybody else wants to throw out there before we head out? I'll just say it's good to see you all. Many of you I haven't seen in a long time, and you look great. Thank you. It's nice to see you.
Thank you, Justin. Have a good
Thanks,
night.
Thank you, Justin. Nice seeing you guys.
Good seeing you.
Yep. So long.